Welcome to another episode of the Coaster101 Podcast. I am Eric Woolley, joined this week by just Andrew Stilwell. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going great, Eric. How are you?
Not bad. So this week we are going to do in the first of what is maybe, hopefully, going to become a recurring series that we'll do every so often on the podcast, where we sort of try and take a slightly deeper dive into some of the parks that we are the most familiar with, kind of our home parks. Maybe kind of like an audio guide to the park for people who haven't been in a long time. And as most Coaster 101 readers and probably lots of our listeners have either gathered or already know, Andrew is a resident of North Carolina and a big Carowinds fan / expert. Correct? Is that fair to say, Andrew?
Those are two very strong words, but I think you could definitely put me in at least one of those categories for sure.
All right, so this week we're gonna get into Carowinds, and we're gonna learn about it a little bit from Andrew. I've been there once, so I'll chime in. I'll chime in occasionally with thoughts on things. But maybe Andrew, if you want to start, either give us sort of both a brief history of Carowinds and maybe also like a little bit of your history with the park.
Yeah, Carowinds is, for those who are unaware, the park's address is Charlotte, North Carolina, but it holds the distinction as the only amusement park in the United States to be situated on a state line. The park is located partially in North Carolina, partially in South Carolina. In talking to the park before, that results in some very interesting things. If you go to the park, you'll realize that all the ticket booths are on the South Carolina side. That is by design. So I don't know exactly how it works or which tax rate works differently for the parks, but it is situated on state lines and as such is subject to inspection from both states in their respective areas. And the way you find out the roller coasters, which state a roller coaster is in, and who inspects it at the beginning of the season is where the station is. So there are a couple of coasters that cross the state line, but where the station is where the coaster technically resides, which is why Intimidator is the tallest roller coaster in South Carolina, despite being in a North Carolina park. Carowinds opened in 1973. It was the vision of a Charlotte businessman named Pat Hall, and Pat Hall was inspired by a trip to Disneyland, actually, as most people in the 60s and 70s were.
Yeah. Lots of modern theme parks inspired by Disneyland.
So he came back, and he had this grandiose plan, and Carowinds was going to be an amusement park. It was this big resort. It was going to have a big hotel, big shopping plaza. There were plans long before the Carolina Panthers to have an NFL stadium where the 50-yard line would be the state border. For a variety of reasons, a lot of that never really came to fruition. Pat Hall actually sold the park in 1975. That I believe the oil crisis had a role in that. But he sold the park in 1975 to Taft Broadcasting, which later became Family Leisure Centers. In those early years, I have to give a special shout out to the park mascots because, in this era of every park has its own intellectual property. Carowinds had these mascots. They had Ringo Raccoon. They had Carol Lion, who was a lion. They had Petunia the Pig, I believe. That may be wrong. And I believe there's a dog called Hercules. So they just had these 4 generic mascots in the early 70s. And once Family Leisure Centers and Taft Broadcasting took them over, they had the license to the Hanna-Barbera characters. So you had, your Scooby-Doos and the Wacky Racers people and all those cartoons that I've forgotten about.
Taft was also, they were the ones who were affiliated with like the Kings Island,
right?
Kingston,
yeah,
and all those,
so,
right? Yeah.
Taft, they were acquired by King's Entertainment Company in the, I want to say the early 80s. But that was, and then they in turn were acquired by Paramount in 1993, right. With the other Family Leisure Center parks, which are Kings Dominion, Kings Island, Canada's Wonderland, and what was known as just Great America at that point, I believe. Or maybe,
it was I don't remember when it switched. I guess it was just Great America, because before that it was Marriott's Great America.
right. So they were a Paramount Park for about 13 years, from 1993 to 2006, when Paramount Parks sold all their parks to Cedar Fair, and they joined the Cedar Fair family in 2006. At Carowinds today, there are 56 rides and attractions, including 14 roller coasters. They've got their in-park water park, which was the first dual, pay one price, get two parks inside water park. It's called Carolina Harbor. But yeah, that's a quick Cook's tour of the history. I'm sure there's a lot I've left out, but it's got quite the storied history over the last 47 years.
So I do want to hear a little bit about your personal history with the park, but before that, do we know if the weird former custom IP characters for the original Carowinds, are they still owned by the park, and can you get throwback weird raccoon t-shirts at Carowinds?
Right now, I do not believe they have the. It is a long forgotten character, and a list of characters. In talking to people at the park, some of whom listen to this podcast, I know there is an underground movement to bring back some of the characters. Ringo Raccoon, especially. If you're not following the Twitter account, We Want Ringo 73, you should be doing so, and that's all I'm going to say on that. There's some great photoshops of people, or somebody, could be somebody affiliated with this podcast, maybe not, who just Photoshop Ringo Raccoon into all sorts of Carowinds attractions. So
people love weird nostalgic characters these days.
I'm not going to say that I bought a Ringo Raccoon milk mug on eBay this morning, but I have a milk mug coming to my house very soon.
Awesome. So you grew up in North Carolina, right? So have you been going to Carowinds forever?
So I was born in North Carolina, grew up in South Florida, and then moved back to North Carolina in 2000. So I've lived here 2/3 of my life. And so I've been going to Carowinds off and on. In the early 2000s, it was a okay park. It had some good rides, and but I also was unable to drive, so it required a parent taking me and paying for the admission. Yep. And I remember we went, maybe once or twice a year. And then obviously after I graduated college, had some money, started writing for Coaster101. Carowinds became a more frequent destination for me. Kind of along that, that same timeline. Obviously I started writing for Coaster101 in fall of 2013 after graduating college in 2012. Starting in 2014, there was construction of this brand new Giga Coaster, Fury 325. I think some people might have heard of it. But, covering the construction of Fury 325 for Coaster101 was kind of like my reintroduction to the park in a way. Yeah. Obviously, it was fun following that. It was fun following the teases. But yeah, it's over the last 5 years specifically, Carowinds is taken off and has exploded with just growth every year. Obviously, Fury was in 2015. They had the Carolina Harbor water park rebranding in 16. In 17, they had, the all-new county fair area. 2018, they redid their kids area. 2019, obviously, they got another roller coaster in Copperhead Strike. And, 2020 was going to be a great year. Unfortunately, we'll hit the COVID bell right now because we brought up COVID, but 2020 was going to be a great year for Carowinds. They were going to have Grand Carnival, which is a interactive street festival for that multiple Cedar Fair parks have, as well as Boogie Board Racer, the mat racing water slide, which I've seen pictures of, looks very impressive. Water parks aren't necessarily my jam, but it was going to be a great year, and obviously when we can get back to Carowinds, it will be a great year. So you mentioned Fury as kind of part of your reigniting
your love and interest in the park.
Right.
So it's probably a good time to now get into the coasters. I think we all know about Fury. I'm sure you want to talk about Fury some, but I'm going to ask you to keep it short because you talk about it a lot. Obviously, big Giga, highly rated. We all love it. Opened in 2015. Tell me a little bit about the other coasters at the park, because I think those are a lot less familiar to most roller coaster fans who haven't been or aren't from the area.
Right. So as I mentioned, there are 14 roller coasters at Carowinds, and the highlight is Fury 325. It's the tallest, fastest, and longest traditional lift hill coaster in the United States. And I believe some of those stats carry over the world. I haven't been up to date on my RCDB record holding lately. But Fury it's my favorite coaster. I can't say enough good things about it, but since I have to keep this short and it's a pretty short podcast, I'm going to move on. I love Fury. If you go to Carowinds, you have to ride at the end. Also, I briefly touched on Copperhead Strike, which was Carowinds' new addition last year. It's a Mock Rides dual launch coaster, super heavily themed. We did an interview with the Weber Group. Check that out on the site to see kind of what went into that. And it's part of this whole Cedar Fair renaissance of putting some theming into their coasters, giving the coasters a backstory. The ride experience on Copperhead Strike is great. There are multiple moments of hang time. It's not the fastest. It's not the tallest. It's not the most. You'll be turned upside down inversions. There's only 5 on the coaster, but it is a very fun ride. And for a park that was missing a launch coaster for quite a long time, following the closure of White Lightning in the 80s, which is a cult fan favorite at Carowinds if you talk to anybody associated with the park, it definitely filled that launch coaster gap quite nicely. Some other coasters, you've got the Intimidator. It's a B&M Hyper, opened in 2010, so celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. Not to be confused with the other Intimidator, which also opened in 2010 at King's Dominion. John touched on this a little bit last week, but when parks have a B&M Hyper and a B&M Giga in the same park, you get a little nervous to kind of see how they're going to, if they just do the same thing, like if you're getting the same ride twice. But Fury is all about the speed and the transitions, whereas Intimidator, you get a lot more floater airtime. It's not to say a smoother ride, but it is a completely different ride experience.
We got into that similarly a few episodes ago when we were talking to Nick after he rode Orion at their media preview, because I think he said something similar with Orion and Diamondback, that Orion reminded him a little bit of Fury, and that has a lot more kind of lateral kind of forces going on. It's not
right.
Lots of B&M Hypers are very out and back with big hills and big floater airtime, and Fury, like Orion, sort of a lot more kind of being thrown out of your seat and twisted a little bit.
Right. There's also Afterburn, another coaster from B&M. This is a B&M invert, celebrated its 20th anniversary last year in 2019. Used to be called Top Gun, the jet coaster, and if you know anybody who grew up in the Carolinas, they will still call it Top Gun. I, to this day, will still call it Top Gun. But that's another coaster. It's not the tallest, but it's built into the terrain in the park, and I did a feature for the park last year that kind of talked about how the coaster was laid out, and it sits on the highest point of Carowinds, on the topography, and it just takes advantage of that terrain. Very smooth ride, still one of the better B&M inverts to this day. I might be a little biased on that.
So most of the Coaster 101 writers went in 2017, I think, 2016, something like that. And my memory was that I think Afterburn it may have even been my second favorite coaster after Fury. I remember, it was definitely one of my top B&M inverts. I love the way that it used the ground, and it, my right that has it goes sort of underground at one point. It's got a little trench part, like a very good effect with some head choppers that's unexpected, and it's kind of wooded and lots of it is hidden. And I think I remember it being bigger than I expected because it was opened, I think, close to the same time as the Top Gun at California's Great America, and like have similar layouts, but this one is longer and has more going on. And I was a big fan of Afterburn. That was definitely one of my top coasters when we were there.
For sure. And I'm not gonna go all the way down the gamut here. I'm just gonna read off a couple of highlights. They've got Nighthawk, which came to the park as Borg Assimilator in 2004. It's the first Vekoma flying coaster, so it's the prototype. It was at Eric's home park of California's Great America. There's also Vortex, which is a B&M stand-up. It's the oldest B&M stand-up. It is the third roller coaster ever created by B&M and is the oldest or the second oldest B&M that maintains its original location, I think, right with Patriot, also at Great America.
The oldest unmodified B&M coaster.
And then, obviously, Carolina Cyclone. If you've been reading the site recently, there was a really good retrospective. I say really good just because I wrote it. But there was a well-written retrospective on the history of the Carolina Cyclone and its 40 years, as well as its new trains, which come to Carowinds by way of Kings Island's recently departed Vortex. So the legacy of Vortex will continue to live on, and Carolina Cyclone gets to be the benefactor or beneficiary.
Yeah, that's always exciting when I think both a sign that an old ride is getting a little bit of love and that there's still life in it when something like that happens. What about so I know that you've years ago on the site you wrote about Thunder Road when it closed. I don't know if you can get into that, but some of the other historic coasters the park has lost that stood out to you when they were still there.
Yeah, fortunately the park has only closed 3 roller coasters in its 47 years. White Lightning, which I mentioned earlier, it's a Schwarzkopf shuttle loop, which is currently at a park in South Africa. One day I will get down to South Africa to ride it, just because it closed at Carowinds before I was born. Never got the opportunity. Thunder Road, as you mentioned, Eric, it was a racing wooden coaster that, for many years, one side, the trains faced in reverse. When Cedar Fair purchased the park, they changed that. Some of my best coaster memories were riding in what would be the front row of the Thunder Road train, but it was the back row facing reverse.
Right.
It's very fun. And then one other one is the Flying Super Saturator. Wasn't at Carowinds very long. We've talked about this. It's kind of a predecessor to Roller Soaker at Hershey Park. Feel free to peruse the site for a retrospective on the Flying Super Saturator, which would have turned 20 years old this year had the park not removed it in 2007.
Right. And also go back and listen to our recent episode about defunct coasters where those came up as well. Obviously it's a great coaster lineup. I think a lot of times when I've gone to a park for the first time, it's easy to look up the list of coasters and their coaster rankings and all of that. Usually, my biggest surprises are usually finding some non-coaster ride that I'd either never heard of or barely heard of, but then somebody said, "Oh, you have to ride this. It's great." Are any of the flat rides or dark rides at Carowinds that stand out to you as things that a new person should make sure to find time for when they go?
Yeah, one thing I always tell people when they go to Carowinds is you have to take a ride on the Carolina Sky Tower. It's an original park attraction. It's about 300 feet tall, but it's just an observation tower you sit in. It's well air-conditioned, which is really nice, but you get a great view of the park. On a clear day, you can see the Charlotte skyline in the distance, but always got to get a ride on the Carolina Sky Tower. The park recently moved their PTC carousel, which is PTC number 67 out of 87. So it was one of it's only one of 30-ish PTC carousels still in existence. That just celebrated its 40th anniversary at the park as well. And it's being, beautifully restored each off season with, a variety of horses kind of being recarved and all that. Carowinds they've got 2 interactive shooting attractions. I shooting, I guess, is the operative term here. They've got the Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare 3Z Arena, which is a mouthful to say, but if you just say Plants vs. Zombies, it's a lot easier. That took over the park's former action theater, which had, the SpongeBob movie and the Days of Thunder and all that. But Plants vs. Zombies, it's from Alterface, and it's a 3D interactive. It's not a ride though, so it's an interactive attraction where you're divided up into plants or zombies, and you shoot the other one. It's some really cool technology. Selfishly, I'm pretty good at it.
It's sort of like a 3D. It's sort of like an interactive motion simulator, right? Like you sit on a thing that moves around with the 3D screen, right?
It's kind of like a picture sitting like on a bicycle or a motorcycle. I mean, you straddle that, and it kind of, there's some pitch back and forth. It's not really any side to side motion. You kind of have some degrees forward and some degrees back, but you're shooting at a screen, and there's it's the advanced targeting system, so you get a little dot on the screen. It's not everybody firing the same red laser beam, but it's quite fun, and I always make sure to do it again on those days that it gets very hot in the park. It's another ride where you can go and cool down inside, and it's well themed. The blasters are I believe Dave's hot sauce is a character from the game, and so it's Crazy Dave's hot sauce. So those blasters are really well themed, and I can't say enough good things about Plants vs. Zombies. Also on the classic red laser gun front, there is Boo Blasters on Boo Hill, which is the staple I think it's at a couple of the Cedar Fair parks right now. It used to be a Scooby-Doo interactive dark ride, but Boo Blasters has the titular Boocifer, so it's it's IP without really being IP. But yeah, I always love a Sally dark ride shooter. They're some of my favorite rides to ride anywhere. So I always ride Plants vs. Zombies, always ride Boo Blasters unless it has a super, super long line, which every once in a while it does.
I think the last time I rode a Boo Blasters was probably at King's Dominion a couple years ago. Those are rides that, I think the same way. Like, they're certainly not the highest tech or like the most detailed in them, right? They're not super fancy, but they're always fun, and usually they don't have a super long line. So it's always like it's one of those things that I need a break from a roller coaster. Let's go ride Boo Blasters.
Yep. And then I gotta give quick recognition to the 4 new flats in the county fair section of the park that all opened in 2017. There's Do-Si Do, which is a Hus Choika. There's Rock and Roller, which is Music Express. Electro Spin, which is this crazy looking Top Scan, and then a Wave Swinger. Carowinds has a fair amount of rides in the park that kind of do the same thing when they swing around a central point. They've got Yo-Yo, they've got Wave Swinger, they've got Windseeker, they've got 2 rides in Camp Snoopy, the kids area. So if you're looking to swing, Carowinds has you covered there for sure.
It was, I do remember because those all opened in, 2017, the year we went, I think. Mm-hmm. I like that they were doing that kind of flat ride investment. I mean, the whole Cedar Fair chain has sort of been doing some of that recently, and it's nice to see them restoring some of those classic rides and getting them in, and having sort of more modern flat rides in there as well.
Right.
So good. Obviously, there's a pretty big ride collection with a wide range of options at Carowinds, but as anyone who's listened to our past podcast knows, this is a thing that comes up a lot, and something that I always ask people on Twitter if I'm going to a new park. Even harder, I think, to find out about than what good flat rides exist at a park is whether there's anything specific that's worth eating. Since I know theme park food is close to your heart, Andrew.
Yes.
What do you tell somebody who's going to Carowinds for the first time, or who hasn't been there in 20 years? Where do you tell them to go eat?
So that is a tough question, and it really depends on my mood that I'm in that particular day. The one thing I will say, and do not eat a Chick-fil-A inside of Carowinds. These parks, Cedar Fair Park specifically, have spent so much time and effort over the past several years to kind of reinvent themselves culinarily. They've hired executive chefs who are putting new and exciting things on the menu. Every time I go to Carowinds, unless it's a Sunday because Chick-fil-A is not open, the line is out the door at Chick-fil-A for people wanting to pay $9 for a sandwich you can get outside the park. I believe there's one like a 6-minute drive from Carowinds for half the price. Don't go to Chick-fil-A. Don't go to Chick-fil-A at Carowinds. What I will say is the brisket and macaroni and cheese at Harmony Hall is probably one of my favorite theme park meals of all time. They smoke the brisket on site, and we talked about this on our theme park Mount Rushmore episode. You can smell the brisket being smoked, especially if you're riding at night. They had their own special barbecue sauce. Fantastic. Also love the 3-meat pizza at Blue Ridge Country Kitchen, which was new in 2019. It's pork. It's sausage, or it's pork, beef, and chicken, I believe, on a pizza. And you throw a little bit of the special Copperhead Strike, kind of a sweet heat sauce on it, and it is next level good. There's also some really good food at Carowinds during their special events. At Scarowinds, which is their Halloween event, they've got this thing called a Haunt Finger Sandwich, which is chicken fingers, french fries, and mozzarella sticks, all on a hoagie roll, topped with marinara sauce. It is a fat kid's dream. And
that sounds horrifying to me.
It's okay. It's really good, I promise. And Winterfest, they've got the deep fried turkey sandwich that had this like cranberry tempura batter on it that was really good. And nice. I always have to give a shout out to the Christmas Treeza, which is Christmas tree shaped pizza. It's regular pizza, but I think I had a hand in naming it, so that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, and I will say that one of my like clearest memories of Carowinds is that smelling the Harmony Hall brisket and smoke as you go up the lift hill on Intimidator. So that always sticks in my mind, so I know whenever I get back there, that is probably where I'm going to go eat first.
Right.
So that, I think that was like, we've given people a good rundown of rides they need to hit. We've told them where they should eat. Are there any sort of broader tips for somebody visiting the park for the first time that you'd suggest? Order of things, like what's the itinerary you'd do?
So if you're dead set on getting to Carowinds and riding all 14 of their roller coasters, it's going to be very tempting to, when the gate opens, to sprint to the back right corner of the park and go ride Fury because of its interaction with the entrance in the midway, or you'll go back to Copperhead Strike in the center of the park because it's brand new and it's still got that new coaster smell to it, or you might line up at Intimidator because it's right there, it's right by the entrance, and it gets a pretty hefty crowd first thing in the morning. My best piece of advice for anybody visiting Carowinds and wants to ride all the roller coasters: ride Nighthawk first. I will say Nighthawk is a coaster. It's not one of my favorites. I don't often seek out riding it while I'm there, but if I'm there with somebody who's there for the first time, I always want to get them on it just because the flying sensation is a very fun sensation. But the way the roller coaster is laid out, there are only 2 trains. I believe there's only 6 rows on those trains, and so capacity-wise, and it takes longer to load than other coasters because of its unique restraint system. If you want to ride Nighthawk first, because the cruise at Intimidator, the cruise at Copperhead Strike, and the cruise at Fury move those trains very quickly. So you will, I've been visiting Carowinds, multiple times a year since Fury opened in 2015. I've never waited more than 20 minutes in line for Fury. So that says a lot about the coaster's operations. It says a lot about its popularity. That's my biggest, my pro tip for all of Carowinds is ride Nighthawk first if you're going to ride it. Another pro tip, especially in the summer, is if there are shows in the Carowinds Theater, make sure to get there early. The last couple of years, they've had a really, really entertaining Cirque du Soleil style show. Especially early in the season when it's hot, the air conditioning in the Carowinds Theater is great, and people know it is great, so they will line up and they will fill that theater very quick. So if you think you're just going to roll in there at showtime, you're not going to. So if you're going to go to a show in the Carowinds Theater, get there early.
Do they let people into the theater early enough that you can wait for the show in the air conditioning instead of standing out in the sun?
I don't want to quote the exact time. I think it's like 15, 20 minutes early.
Okay.
But if you're not there right at the time, especially to see the Cirque show, and I don't know what's going in there in 2021, but the Cirque show regularly packed out the theater.
Yeah.
And just as a quick, other tip, Saturdays, as with most parks, are your most busy days. If you're going on a weekend, I highly recommend going on a Sunday morning. There are a variety of reasons for this. Notwithstanding,
the Chick-fil-A is closed is probably the main reason nobody comes.
Chick-fil-A is closed, and being in the Bible Belt as Carowinds is, there are a lot of people in the South who love their church. And so the park will, fill in on Sunday afternoons, but Sunday mornings are, they're pretty light crowd-wise. So if you want to go and get a lot done, Sunday morning is a great time.
Yeah, I certainly remember that from our visit when I think we went both Saturday and Sunday, and the Sunday morning was like markedly less busy than the rest of the weekend.
Right. And then my other piece would be advice is just to take time and relax. There are multiple areas inside of Carowinds. There's an article on the Carowinds blog that is, places you can stop and take a break. They've got this really great covered walkway that in the summer is in full bloom, so it's in shade. And then, Camp Snoopy, their renovated kids area, they've got these rocking chairs that have shade covers over them. They're under pergolas. There's rocking chairs all over the park. This is the South after all. So anytime you can just, stop and, again, to use a Southern expression, sit a spell, take the opportunity to do it. Carowinds it's a very beautiful park. They've put a lot into landscaping in the last couple of years. It's not, not as much asphalt. There's a lot more brick pavers in the areas now. So it is a very beautiful park, a great place to just kind of sit and relax. Another place that comes to mind as I'm talking is they've got this fireplace right by Copperhead Strike. And I know during Winterfest, their winter event, it's a very popular spot just because of, sitting by the fire with a, hot chocolate or other beverage of your choice. They've got their own IPA if that's your speed. But sitting by the fire is always nice in a rocking chair. So highly recommend that. So those are probably my biggest tips and takeaways. Also, Carowinds is really busy, especially the closer you get to Halloween.
Good to know. I guess you've touched on some of these probably already, but if there are any more, or like one more hidden gem that you would sort of want to highlight as something that people shouldn't miss if they go?
Yeah, I'll give you two hidden gems here. One is be sure to take a spin on Woodstock Express, it's one of the park's older roller coasters. It's a wooden roller coaster. It's one of those family style kid coasters. Surprisingly fun. I know they put a ton of work into it this off season. Really good positive airtime for the enthusiasts, but it's not scary. So if you've got kids who are kind of looking for that first wooden roller coaster experience, it's really a great roller coaster. I know we took you guys on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the kiddie wooden coasters are something that I wish any of the parks out here had, because I feel like they're always as kiddie coasters go, I feel like they tend to just be more fun for adults than other models.
Right. And then another roller coaster I want to touch on real quick is the Carolina Gold Rusher. It's one of the other original remaining park attractions.
Yeah.
And it's an old Aero mine train, but it's still got the restraints where it latches in 3 rows at one time. Still provides really enjoyable rides, and it's almost 50 years old. So between Woodstock and Express and Carolina Gold Rush, you've got 2 very solid family coasters at Carowinds. And then the other hidden gem at Carowinds, and when you think about a regional park and you think about live entertainment, it's a lot of times, people compare live entertainment to, like a Disney or Universal park. I know Carowinds, they've got a lot of live shows. I mentioned the Cirque show earlier, but they had, last summer, they had all these musical acts on the Midway. They had a show in front of Copperhead Strike called Busker Jam that our buddy Justin Mabry, who does the podcast theme song, he produced. They have all these different live shows, and the live entertainment at Carowinds is definitely worth taking the time to experience. And I say this as somebody who typically goes to a park and it's just like go ride. Take the time to see at least one of the shows at Carowinds. I know the amount of effort that is put into them, and especially with the Cirque show last year, they had some incredible acrobatics. They had this guy who was kind of doing the balancing board. He would put a board on a cylindrical object and he would balance, and it would stack and stack and stack and stack until he was like touching the ceiling. That was crazy, and you just sit there and you just like, wow, how does that happen, and why is this happening at a park that's like a regional park? So it is again, can't say enough good things about the entertainment, and that's only going to be enhanced next year with Carnival. And I know I said 2, and this is that was 3, so this is 4. It's not necessarily a hidden gem, but Winterfest. It's the park's kind of third go around. They did it, back in the 80s, and they had one go of it in the early 2000s, I think, or maybe in the 90s when they did it. But this is their third go, and it's more of a chain-wide program. But Winterfest at Carowinds is such a great time. And again, as someone who's typically ride, I go to Winterfest, I walk around, I look at the Christmas lights, I take in all the atmosphere. The only ride I ride during the night is the Sky Tower, so I can see the lights from above. And I, spend the whole night there, and it is a blast. I hate that we're not going to get to experience it this year. But again, at the underlying message here, very much looking forward to 2021.
You don't take a Fury night ride when you're...
So Fury's closed during Winterfest. If you've seen
cold, I have no idea what weather in North Carolina is like.
Yeah, it's they keep Afterburn open just because as legend goes, or so I've been told, when they were testing Afterburn, there was snow on the ground, so they knew it could run in the cold. But
I see.
B&M has a recommended lowest temperature. So, Vortex is closed, Fury's closed, Copperhead Strike is open. I take that back. I did get one ride on Copperhead Strike during Winterfest last year. So, some of the coasters are open, some of the rides are closed, and it's unfortunately not open, but to go dashing through the snow on Fury 325 would be pretty nice. But I don't think it's, mechanically possible.
Right. All right. Well, thanks, Andrew. Any last things you want to mention about Carowinds? Any can't miss things? I feel like we've covered everything pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. Some things you can't miss, like you have to do at Carowinds. If you ride Copperhead Strike, sit on the left-hand side of the train. You'll see why. I'm not going to ruin the surprise if you haven't ridden it. Be sure to get a ride on Fury at night if possible. Preferably in the front row. It's absurd how different the ride on Fury is in the front row and the back row, and how different the ride is at night and during the day. Another seat that I recommend to everybody, Eric, I know when you visited, I made you sit in the seat, was try and get us a ride in the back row of Fury, left-hand side of the train. You hit the turnaround right by the park entrance, and you have so much floater airtime coming out of that seat. You've got this sideways airtime that we've talked about that comes with Orion, but you're out of your seat. It feels like from the top of that hill all the way down as you go to the what they call the hive dive under the entrance.
I definitely second that. Andrew's recommendation was accurate. I think we were lucky enough to be able to ride Fury enough times that we sort of could rotate, so all of us got a ride in that spot, and it really was both like an amazing feeling and also very different than other part. Like you still get that airtime in other seats, but not nearly as much as you get in that one corner.
Right. And then the last thing I want to talk about real quick is just next year. Obviously, 2020, the park unfortunately was not able to open. So Carowinds has shifted their focus to the 2021 season. So everything that was going to be new in 2020, Grand Carnival and Boogie Board Racer, the mat racing water slide, they're going to be at the park in 2021. And as someone who has experienced Grand Carnival at King's Dominion in 2019, I was thrilled for it to come to my home park at Carowinds. The live entertainment, the parade is incredible. They've got, floats from Kern Studios, who does the Mardi Gras the floats.
Yeah.
They're gorgeous. And Kern also does the parade floats for Carowinds Winterfest Parade, which was, I didn't even get to talk about that, and we're so far into this. I'm going to go back. Go to the park during Winterfest and experience the parade, just because that is some incredible holiday entertainment.
Is there a write-up about the parade on the website from your last
there's a write-up, and there's definitely, if you go to our YouTube channel and dig deep enough, we've got some parade footage there. The music's great, but Grand Carnival, again, the parade is fantastic, the food is fantastic. I cannot wait for next year at Carowinds for it to come.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks a ton, Andrew. That was great. Obviously, like we've said a bunch of times, Carowinds is closed this year, but for everyone making their 2021 Carowinds plans, hopefully this gives you some guidance, tips, and advice. So we greatly appreciate that, Andrew. Do you want to add one more thing?
Yeah, just the park is always doing things on their blog and social media. Their website is www.carowinds.com, and I believe they're at Carowinds on all forms of social media, just like we are at Coaster101 on all forms of social media. So be sure to check them out: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The folks over there are always putting out some new and interesting content, and if you look hard enough, you might see a byline from me. So
yes, yeah. Basically, Andrew wants you to go read his stuff there, but also when you read his stuff on the Carowinds blog, make sure to also read it on Coaster101, because we usually get to cross post those at least a couple days, and usually there's different photos with them, right?
For sure, yeah.
So
different. So photos.
it's worth reading the features on both sites.
Click twice. Help everyone else out.
Yeah, I think that is all we've got for today. If anyone listening is also a Carowinds regular, and there's something that we missed or that you want to add, or if anyone's never been to Carowinds and has other specific questions, email us your thoughts, podcast@coaster101.com, or like we said, ask questions or send other tips to us on social media. We're at Coaster101 everywhere. Also, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, and if you can, give us a rating and review. It helps new listeners find us, which is great both for us and for potential new listeners. Thank you, as always, to JM Music Design for the theme song, and we will be back next week. Thanks very much, Andrew.
See ya.